What's up guys, this is Teddy. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This video, we're getting close to the end. We're in the final stretch. We're going to be building the edit user. So in every social media app or in every app where you have maybe some kind of way to interact with other users, you need the users to be able to edit their profile. And in this video, we're going to do that. And ironically, it doesn't seem like it would be very difficult, but this part of the app is probably one of the most difficult, but you're going to learn a lot, and there's going to be a lot of things that are I'm going to show you that probably not going to see in a lot of other places. So I hope that you stick around for the whole video, because this is going to be really cool, and like I said, you're gonna learn a ton, and it's going to be very useful information. So first thing, let's just kind of maybe logically talk over what we're going to do by booting up the app. And we've already got our runners, so we can view our runners, but we really can't see anything, and we need the runners to be able, or whatever type of hobby you're trying to build this app for, we need the runners to be able to have a picture, and we also want them to be able to view a city and state. And the way that you do this is you put the ability for them to edit their profile in the dashboard, and it kind of looks a little ugly right now. But we're just going to have a little button right here, and they're going to click it, and it's going to go to their profile, and they can upload their own profile picture so that other runners can see their profile. So first thing is that what we want to do is we want to just get the scaffolding up, and the way that we do that is just go into our controller and start building out our actual actions for this. We already have the index. You could just call this edit. I kind of went against that though. I'm going to call this we're going to make it async, and we're going to call this edit user profile, because there could be another edit that maybe you want to add to this. I assume that maybe if this is your app, or maybe if you're making this a meetup app for whoever, maybe you're trying to meet people who are in a band or something, or maybe you're making it like a musician meetup app, that maybe you might add some other type of edit. So I'm going to say edit user profile, just in case you want to put like another type of edit in your dashboard, be a little bit more specific. And then no secret, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go into the dashboard, and I'm going to create a edit user profile view. And I need to stop this so that I can put in that view. Go ahead, we're gonna go add. Let me see here. And as usual, make sure that you name it the same name that you name the function. So let's actually go over here. So we have the edit user profile view. Just kind of make sure we look it over. And there's many ways that you could do this. You could actually just pass in the int and the ID, but it actually might be better to pass this into an HTTP context. And what I mean by this is, instead of having to pass in the int, what you can do is you can bring in HTTP context, or the get user ID extension method that we made, in instead of having to pass it into the URL or into the user param and having to pass it in, I'll show you what I mean. Instead of having to pass it into the query parameter, you can actually just pass it in, or it will pull the information in through the server side. So instead of having user equals GUID like that, it can be done on the server side instead of having to actually pass it in on the front end, which is, I think, more appropriate in this case, because it may not be a good thing to be passing in information like that in the dashboard. I don't know, something about that just doesn't seem very secure, and it doesn't seem very robust to me. Don't know exactly why, it's just a kind of a gut feeling. So what I am going to do is I'm going to bring in that HTTP context accessor. It's kind of a lot of words there. Then we're going to go here. We're going to give it the typical naming convention that we always do. And then same thing up here. We're going to go private read only and HTTP context accessor. HTTP context accessor. Then IntelliSense is going to take care of that for us, so we don't have to actually worry about that, and we should be good to go. The next thing that we're going to need, excuse me, drink some of my iced coffee. Somebody was commenting about my iced coffee. You got my iced coffee right here. Darren, if you're watching this, make sure to leave a comment down below. Shout out. So we're going to go up here. We're going to bring in our photo service. So private read only. Then we're going to go photo service. And for some reason, okay, that was just a little hiccup there from the IntelliSense, looks like. Yeah, make sure we bring in that photo service, because when we're going to create user profile, or when we add or edit our user profile, or when the user goes in and actually edits their user profile, you want them to have a picture, obviously, because pictures are very important in how we judge each other online. Just saying. And you want that picture there. It makes, it will dramatically enhance people wanting to stay on your app. Okay, so we've got our dependency. We brought in all of our dependency injection stuff. Now we can actually get down here and start building all this stuff out. So we're going to go HTTP context, and we're going to bring in that user, and then we're going to bring in our get user ID, which is actually an extension method that we made not too long ago. Then we're going to bring in that user. Then we need to bring in our user. When you're editing a profile, you're going to need to bring in the user, because when you're editing, you're going to need to inject all of that data into the actual form so that users can see stuff that they've already filled out beforehand. And I actually thought about bringing this in just through the user service, but here's the thing that happens when you rely. So if you have and this is this has happened to me many times in like a production environment. If you rely way too much on a repository and you don't separate stuff, like you don't separate concerns, and you have one method that is literally being injected into maybe like 20 controllers, and you have to go back and change that method, that's probably like a whole entire, that's a whole sprint. That's like a whole entire 2 weeks of work. And it kind of, as programmers, we battle this, we want to make our code more dry, and we want to make our code less repeatable. But sometimes if you have a method that relies on like 20 things and you have to go back and change that shit, oh my God. And I've had to be in situations like that where I've had to like go back and change like a method where it was injected in like 20 controllers, and we had to go back and change it. And it was just like, well, oh my God, I'm getting mad just thinking about it. But I'm getting a little carried away here. So let's go back. We'll go back into our repository. We're going to go dashboard repository, and where is my repository? We're going to go in here, and we're going to create a get user by ID get user by ID repository. So what we want to do, we just want to go in here. We're going to go async. We're going to go task app user and get user by ID. get user by ID. Then we're going to pass in the string because it's a GUID, and that's how we're going to search that with the database. That's why it's not an int. Just remember that. Not very complicated. Still something that you want to be aware of. So find async, and then we're going to find async like that. It's going to search the users. It's going to find the users, find async. And then we need to go into our repository, and we actually need to bring that in there. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to use this method with dependency injection. You could just use it, but you can't use it with a dependency injection, and that's why we want to have dependency injection. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to bring it into our controller. Kind of one of the reasons that we have interfaces. So we're going to go, just going to bring that dot, we're going to get user by ID, and then we're going to go ahead and pass in that user ID that we pulled from the HTTP context. Okay. And let's go back to our controller. That should work. And the next thing that we need to do is we also need to have sometimes if we're editing the user profile, and this should not happen. If they are logged in, like this obviously is going to work, but we want some form of validation just in case maybe there's an error with the database or something happens to where they can't actually get to, they can't actually find the user, and we want them to see an error page if that happens. Then, let me see here. Let's create a edit user view model. So we're going to go here, go in here, go in here, and we'll call this edit user dashboard view model. Just remember, if in doubt, create a view model for the create a view model, because you can never have too many. I don't think you can ever have too many view models. View models are a good thing that you want to have, and I don't think there's such thing as having. I guess there could be if you really just went crazy, but err on the side of just creating a view model if you have to. Okay, and we want to make this one int because they might not, if they edit, or we want to make this null, we want this little question mark here null because they might not pass up a pace, and you want to have that there just in case that they don't. Otherwise, you're going to get an error in your model state. And I'll show you why you want these little question marks. A lot of times you'll see these little question marks in view models, and they're kind of confusing, and you don't really know what they do, but it has to do with model state, and I will show you what that means here in a second. Also, we're going to have to go into our actual domain here in a second and apply a migration so that we can actually have a profile image URL, because we don't have one in our database yet, and we need to do that. We need to go add that profile image to our database and actually do that, and that'll be fun practice for actually doing database migrations, and I'll give you some really cool tips on how to make it as seamless as possible when you're doing your database migrations. So we're gonna add city state. Another thing is that I went back and I don't think I was just looking at my database and what I had done before, and I'll show you what I did. I thought it would be a good idea just to have this address in here and use the address entity as a way to have the city and the state for the user. But I don't think that that's really the best case, because you're going to have that null street there, and I just don't think that that's really, just something about that just doesn't seem right to me. And what I'm going to do here in a second is I'm just going to sort of hard code in a city and a state and do it that way, as opposed to just using the address, maybe if they're, I'm just going to leave the address in there though. I don't think it's a good thing to take it out because it's not really hurting anything, but I am just going to go in there and add a hard-coded city and state, and maybe later if I want to use the full entire address, we can do that. And the address isn't really hurting anything. And if a thing about migrations too, and I'm getting on a lot of tangents, but a lot of the stuff is really important, is that it's really easy to add columns to a database, but if you delete columns from a database, it will cause a lot of problems. And I know that there is ways to delete stuff from a database, but just kind of think about that and realize that it's really easy to add stuff to a database. It's really easy to add changes to a database, but if you have to delete changes from a database, oh my God, it's so much work and it's so much headache and it's so much stress. So we'll just leave the address there and just hard code that city and state in there. Okay, so let's go back to, we've got our edit user dashboard view model, and now we'll just go in here and we'll actually create it. Edit user view model is equal to new edit user dashboard view model ID, and we can just go ahead and toss in that current user ID. We'll go pace, we'll user pace, we'll go mileage, and we'll add that profile image is equal to user dot profile image. Profile image dot URL. We've got a red squiggly line, which is that's actually a good sign. That's actually what I wanted. So don't panic just yet, because that means we need to actually go back and we need to add that to our database and our domain model, which is going to be fun. It's going to be good practice. And then we're going to have state user dot state. And once again, we're getting red squiggly lines because this does not actually exist in our app user view model. And it's actually kind of cool because type checking tells us that. Otherwise, if we were coding in JavaScript, we wouldn't know that, and we would probably just get crazy errors, which is kind of like the beauty of C# and Java, is that you get, all this type checking, and TypeScript too. So what's happening here is that this user is actually, I put a var there, but it's actually a app user. And if we go to our app user, okay. So this is like I said, this is actually app user. You can see it here. Let me see if I can actually go to it. There we go. So if we go to our app user, you can see, and I'll just bring this over here, the profile image, the city, the state does not even exist. So we actually need to go in there. We're going to add them. And we're going to add them right above the address. So prop, it's going to be string, of course. And I am going to call it profile image URL. And if you wanted, say for instance, if you wanted to have multiple images, what you would do is you would actually create a photo model. You would go in here, you would create a photo model, and you could have multiple images, but just because this is an MVP right now and we're just kind of trying to get things off the ground, we're just going to have one, we're just going to give the user the ability to add one picture. So we're going to go here, we're going to go string, and I'm adding these question marks because you want the ability for these to be null. Otherwise, if they tried, if a user went and created an account, if they created an account and this was not given, and they were not given the ability for this to be null, it's going to give an error because there's these things called constraints. Constraints are important. So I'm gonna go in here and explain what constraints are. So if you really want to get deeper into this, constraints are kind of literally what they sound like, and you can actually see constraints. I'm trying to see here. Maybe it's been so long since I've looked at constraints, but basically, whenever you create a SQL table, you add constraints into the SQL, and one of the constraints is not null. And essentially what is happening here with this question mark is you are adding a constraint, or you're taking away a constraint, whichever one you want, however you want to phrase it. You're taking away a constraint that says that this has to have a value, and when you add that question mark there, you're basically telling SQL to say this does not require a value, and that is what that question mark is for. Isn't it beautiful? Okay. All right, so next thing, because we went and we added these little changes to our database, what we want to do is we actually want to do a migration. And let me see here. So the way that I'm going to do it, if you're on Visual Studio, you would do this like .NET add migration, but because I'm in Visual Studio, we're going to use the good old package manager console. So we're going to say add migration, and I'm going to call this add city state profile image. And fingers crossed, we're going to do this migration, and I really hope this works. Thank you, Lord. So what it did is it went in, not quite just yet, but it gave us this code called migration builder. And whenever we run the up or the update, so if we run update database, so if we run this, what it's going to do is it's actually going to go in and create this within our database. And let me see here. Let's just do a quick little before and after. So we have our pace and our mileage, which is stuff that we added to the user, but we don't have our city or our state or our profile image. And watch what happens when we run this update database. Does all those commands. Gonna go ahead, select the top rows just like this. And if we go back, voila, we have our city, our profile image, and our state. And it's kind of a little wonky. I wish the city and the state were together, but I don't know, just did it that way, but it'll be fine. We can work with it. Great, so we've got that, and we've got edit user profile. Now what we want to do is we want to add a button so that we can actually navigate to this edit user profile form and be able to actually access it. And the way that we do that is we're just going to go into our dashboard here. We are going to copy this down just like this. Copy this. Dashboard. Give it the ASP.NET action. Then we're going to go into edit user profile. So it will have a little slick button that the user can click on and edit their profile. It does kind of look like doo-doo, but I'll go back after. I'm gonna make a course on, heads up, I'm just making a course on unit tests. So I'm gonna make a whole entire course on unit test. Then I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna put a premium bootstrap theme on this thing. It's gonna look slick as hell, and then we're going to deploy it, and you guys are gonna be able to go get a job, because this thing, like I said, this thing's gonna be slick. So it looks like it works. So I'm actually, let me just double check here. Edit user profile. Let's go back in here. Let's double check, make sure that this thing's working. And I'm just not imagining things. So go in here. Going to the, okay, great. Edit user this part right here is indeed working. Great. Now we need to actually start building out the form for this. And the form, I just go to my GitHub. I'm going to paste this in here. Once again, the front end of these forms aren't really that complicated. The only thing that you want to be very aware of is that I have this input hidden field. You want to make sure that you have this input hidden field. You want to make sure this ASP.NET action is pointed towards the correct post controller. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of crazy errors. I've got all of my labels hooked up. Feel free to add your own if you want to go back and add your own if you're building this for your own whatever. And also be sure to have this encoding type to be multi-part form data because it won't be able to handle pictures. And then also make sure to have this image right here the exact same as the one that I had before. Otherwise, it's not going, or make sure it's the exact same as this because otherwise it's not going to be able to handle that image upload. Make sure that you have this edit user dashboard view model hooked up correctly and it's using the model. Otherwise, this view is not going to be able to handle the model correctly. And we should have a beautiful form to start working on. So we got here, we have our form, but we don't actually have any type of infrastructure on the back end to be able to handle this submission. And this is what we're going to handle next. It's going to be a little bit difficult. This is like a pretty difficult part because you're editing a form and you're also having to edit the user pictures for this as well too. And it's going to be a little dicey in some places, and there's going to be some complex entity framework stuff going on, but I'm going to explain it and explain to you some very important caveats that you will learn about and save you a lot of stress in the future. And I'll explain, like how a lot of this really complex entity framework stuff works, and you'll have a really in-depth knowledge of entity framework that will pay off in the future. So just like every other single form, and even IntelliSense knows, he's saying, hey, she's saying, hey, I know what you're about to put here, you little coding badass. All right, I'm being goofy. So we're gonna go in here. We're gonna go edit VM, and we're going to pass in our edit view model. So just remember that when you're posting and you're sending up objects like this. When you send up an object and you have a post like that, and ASP.NET's going to assume that you're posting JSON. Like it's just going to assume that, and it should assume correctly. So next thing, we're going to go in here, we're going to pass in our model state. And if our model state is valid, we do this pretty much on every single one. So model state, we've got this handy little static method that Entity Framework gives us. And we're going to go here, I'm going to say failed to edit profile. So if your model state is not correct, it's going to give you this error. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring you back to the edit user profile. And it's going to put that VM back in there. So if it's not correct, it will still send back the data and it'll still send back everything that the user filled out, but it's just going to give an error message. So if you recall back, go ahead, right click on this edit user dashboard view model, go to definition, and we'll talk a little bit about why you need these question marks in the edit user view model. So if you don't have these question marks here and a user sends up something that's null and they don't send up a value, the model state will trigger and it will show like a bad value. So if you don't have that there and they send up a null value and you don't have this question mark, what's going to happen is that it's going to pass in ASP.NET is going to look at the view model. It's going to say, hey, this can't be null and this is null. So I'm going to trigger the model state to say that this is invalid. And then you're always going to get an invalid model state and you'll be banging your head up against the wall wondering why it's not working when what you really need is just that question mark. So be really aware of that. Also be very aware of what we're about to do right here. So we're going to go in here and we're going to go to the get by. We're going to have to create a get by ID no tracking. So because we have a instance where we're manipulating this, okay, let me just kind of backtrack here. Let's go ahead and before I confuse the ever-living daylights out of you, let's go back and let's go ahead and just create this get by ID no tracking method. That's probably where we should start first. Okay, so no tracking is, number one, it's a way to have performance, or it's a way to make your code more performant, but it's also good when you are trying to track multiple entities and you're trying to, so if you pull two users from the database and you're manipulating them within the same scope, or you're manipulating within the same if statement, you're manipulating them within the same function. I hope to God you're not manipulating them within the global, within a globally scope. That would be pretty crazy, but you get the picture. Within the same scope, if you are manipulating two of the same objects within the same scope, you have to have as no tracking, or it's going to give you the most mind-boggling errors. And the worst part about it is you get on Stack Overflow and it's so confusing. I mean, I'm a pretty decent developer and I could barely figure it out. Like I was like banging my head up against the wall trying to, figure like what the hell was going on with this thing. So go into here. We're going to make this async. We're going to go context.users.where. We're going to get the user by the ID, obviously. We're going to pass in the string ID. We're going to use as no tracking. And then we're going to get first or default async. Just like that. And we need our as no tracking. That looks great. And just remember, when you use first or default, you're only returning one user. If you use toList, you're returning more than one. And because we're only returning one user and we just need one user to kind of look at and be able to judge things, that's what we're going to use. And then we're going to pass in that ID. So get by no ID. All right, so we need to put this thing in the database. And I'm going to go back, or I'm not going to go back, actually. So we go in here, and I'm going to copy this, put this in my interface because it's not recognizing it. Just like that. Then I'm going to go back to my controller, and we have that. Awesome. And this is making, if this is confusing you right now, I'm going to step through it here in a second, and we'll talk more about it. So next thing, we went and we got this user from the database. Like here, I'll show you what this is actually doing, like what is actually happening under the hood. So when we went and wrote that function, it's going to go and it's going to fetch this record. That's what that function literally is doing. It's going into this database that I just made. It's fetching this record, and it's turning this record into an object, more specifically an app user object. And because we went and got this whole entire thing, now we can check this, and it turned it into an object. Remember that? It turned it into an object. What it's going to do is now you can use that. You can just literally use the dot to access these columns. And hopefully that just blew your mind. Like literally what's happening with Entity Framework, it's pulling a record out of the database and it's turning it into an object so that you can manipulate all of this within your code. So now we can go ahead and manipulate this profile image URL that's within our database right here. We can manipulate it within our code. Hopefully. String. Oh, okay, never mind. That's not really an error. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do two checks. We're going to check if it's a string, and we're also going to check if it's null. And it could be either one. I've seen it for some reason. I don't really know what causes this, but sometimes it will just be it'll be an empty string, and sometimes it'll be a null. So we're just gonna check for both of these. We're gonna check, hey, if this thing's empty, we want to go in and we want to add a user photo. And the way that we do that is we go up to this photo service that we made. Remember this? Let's just go back in here and let's just check out this photo service and see, maybe you don't remember like what this photo service is, and maybe this, might confuse you. But like literally what this is going to do is it's going to go out to Cloudinary and it's going to add it to the database, and it's going to return a string for us that we can put in our database. So we go in here, we're going to go await. Then we're going to use this function that we wrote for our Cloudinary service. We're going to pass in that image that we got from our form. So what's this image? Like, let's just check out this image. Let's see what this image is. This image is what's called an iForm file. And if you even go in here, so you just keep going in. Like if you don't know what something is, it's up to the developer to play detective and start figuring out what stuff is, because nobody really is going to explain it to you on the internet. So the best thing that you always want to do if you just don't know what something is, you right click, you go to definition, and you go inside here. So inside here, basically what's happening is it's got all of this just data that we can have. And what you want to do is you want to pass this iForm file into Cloudinary, and Cloudinary is just going to do everything. Cloudinary is just going to say, hey, just give me this iForm object. I'll handle the rest, and you don't even need to worry about it. I just need it in an iForm file, and I'm going to do everything for you. The next thing is that we need to map this. So one of the reasons that we used no tracking is that we're going to have to go into here and actually start manipulating. Okay, so if you go into here and you do this and you try to map an object, or for some reason you're having some type of crazy issue, or you're getting errors that are saying concurrency issues, which is why we're using this so it's called optimistic concurrency. And one day you will get this error. I guarantee you're going to get an error that says optimistic concurrency. You're trying to change you're changing something that's tracking. You're going to get something like a tracking error. When you see stuff like this, that's the reason why we have to use this no tracking, is because behind the scenes, and I'm going to either melt your brain or bore you to death, or you're just going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? Entity Framework is keeping track of your entities. And the way that it does it is it's keeping track of them by basically keeping track of literally what it sounds like. You're keeping track of the entities. And don't type this down. So this is an app user too. And I'm just going to actually bring in app user so it gets rid of this red squiggly line. So if you have two of these and you manipulate these within the same function, that's when the tracking error is going to happen. And it's such a pain to do this, and there's many ways to get around it, but the best way to get around it is to, number one, use no tracking, and map this DTO without using this app user. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to create I call it, it's a little janky. It's a little, you know, I've seen stuff like this in product. This is the reason that I actually know like how to do, like, this is the reason like I actually do this. We're going to actually make our own like hand rolled mapper. So we're going to make like our own little auto mapper. So we're going to go in here. We're going to pass in this edit VM. So we're going to pass in edit VM. We're going to pass in the image, the actual image result that we get back from Cloudinary. So we're going to go image upload result. We're going to call this photo result. Going to do that. And then we need to bring this in. This is actually an object that Cloudinary created. Then what we want to do is we're just going to map them over. So we're going to do this. We're going to go that. We're going to go user.pace is equal to edit vm.pace. We're going to go user mileage is equal to edit vm.mileage. Then we're going to go user dot profile image URL is equal to user dot image URL. We're going to go user dot city is equal to city. User dot state is equal to state. And we're going to go here just like that. And you could just paste that into down here, but I think it looks a little bit better when you actually put it inside of a function. You just having that chunk of code in there like that just does not look good. So we're going to go map user, what did I call it? Map user edit. Yeah, I think that's a good name. And I think IntelliSense actually created that. Then we're going to pass in our user. We're going to pass in our view model. Then we're going to pass in our photo result. Let me actually go back up here. This is not correct. I'm sorry. What you want is you want that photo result. So what's going to happen is Cloudinary is going to download it to their database. Then they're going to actually give you your own URL to actually, they're going to give you the URL of the place where they've stored it. Awesome. Trying to think. Okay, so now once we have that, we go to the dashboard repository. Then we need to make an update. We're going to go user. So go into the dashboard repository. And we need to actually create this update method. So we're going to go public bool update app user. We're going to go context dot users dot update, and we're going to pass in our user. Then we are going to save. We need to create this save function down here. So then we're going to go down to here. We're going to go public bool save. Go down here, var, go saved. This is same thing that we have in all of the rest of our code base. It's literally no different. Then we're going to do this handy little ternary operator so that it returns true or false. And it'll give us a bool whether it's saved or not. Then we need to go into our dashboard repository, and we need to actually add these. So we're going to go bool update. We need to do passing in the whole entire entity. We're going to go here, I'm gonna go bool save. And that should have that running. So now we need to be able to handle when the user actually has a photo. So if the user uploads a photo and they already actually have one, you need to be able to delete it and then add the one that they want. Once again, this is kind of confusing, but so what I did is there may be a better way to do this, but I just wrapped this in a try catch. So photo service, instead of add photo, we're gonna go delete photo, user profile, and then you just pass in the URL that was originally given to you, just like that. And Cloudinary will go in and actually do that all for you. So catch, then we're gonna have an exception. And so if there is an exception, we'll just give some kind of generic error. Could not delete photo. Pass that back. Then we're going to return them to the view with the view model that we created. So after we get done deleting the photo, what we want to do is, and we want to add the new photo. And that's pretty much it. And we can actually use the exact same code that we had up here. Then after that, photo result, let me see here. Oh, we actually need to add this up here because we're adding the photo after we delete it. And if it doesn't work, it's gonna do that try catch. So go up here. That should pretty much do it. And hopefully if we run this thing, my God, my eyes are like killing me. Just gonna give my eyes a chance to rest here. So we're gonna go here. Got our dashboard. Create the edit user profile. Make sure, I think we are in the correct one. Let's actually set this breakpoint. I gotta step away from the screen first. Like, rest my eyes for a second. My God, I'm having like some serious eye strain here. Okay, so I hope this works. I might have to come back because, like I said, my eyes are like. So we're gonna give it 8-minute pace. Charlotte. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna add a picture of me. Then we go here. It triggers the breakpoint. Let's go ahead. Let's make sure that this thing's working. Hold on, pull it back. Pull the microphone back here. So we got app user. That works. And like I said, check out that object right there. Got our object. We've got our ID. Looking good. That's going to go down. There is no image in there for me. So what's going to happen is it's going to add the photo. It's going to go step in here. We're going to map it. Make sure that we got our profile. Yep, we've got, that's our Cloudinary profile image right there. And that's, so Cloudinary took our image, uploaded it to its Cloud bucket. Then it returns a URL, like a nice little URL for us. We've got our city, we're in Charlotte. We've mapped it. We're gonna update. So let's step in here, make sure our update's working. It's gonna save, and then it's going to redirect us, and great. So oh, awesome. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go back and add our images. So we're going to go to our user, then we can uncomment this. So we got our username, then mileage, And that is actually called our, oh, we need to go back into our user view model. Okay, so what we're going to have to do, and I actually didn't foresee this, is we're going to have to actually add this. So we're going to go in here, and I'm just going to suck it up and image. Okay, I'm going to have to stop. I'm going to finish this, but I'm going to have to stop after this because, like I said, my eyes are just like. So we got the profile image. We've got the user controller. And we actually profile image, return that. It may be null, but it's not going to be. And I think we should have it working. Let me go back and make sure. Okay, let me make sure this works, and we should be all good to go. Awesome. And it looks like doo-doo, but we can go back and we can figure that later when my eyes are not killing me. But we have an actual social media aspect of our app, and we can network with other people within our app, and our users can edit their own profiles. That is so amazing. That looks fantastic. Anyway, that's going to be the video for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and as always, thank you for watching.